Yep.
Ready.
All right. Greetings, everyone. Welcome to a special Monday night podcast of what would normally be a Friday night podcast. We're doing that, obviously, because this Friday is Christmas. So, Merry Christmas, everyone. Tonight is mine and one of my guests' only chance this week to record and get this debate out for you. And we had some really interesting topics that we wanted to talk about. So, yeah, we're doing things a little out of order this week. So the question that was asked to us by Concert Cruiser, who unfortunately could not make the chat tonight, but he wants to do his own video on this topic as well. So hopefully we can give him some good talking points. And we'll look forward to his content as well. Is he wanted to know, are cartoons still for kids? Now, in my typical fashion, that's kind of a clickbaity title. But the reason for that being is, I'll define the terms a little bit here. So we obviously know by now, with things like anime, with things like Adult Swim, even, animated sitcoms of the last couple decades, that animation does not specifically need to be for kids. So what we're talking about tonight is animation that's supposedly directed at kids. Things that are going to air after school time, Saturday morning time, on things like, whatever Disney is, whatever Disney calls itself now, Fox, Cartoon Network, Nickelodeon, things like that. And there's probably others that I'm not. I mean, I should be saying Netflix in that as well. Anyway, joining me for tonight's topic is DJ Skywalker. How are you doing tonight, sir?
Good evening. It's a pleasure to return.
It's always a pleasure to have you. We've also got returning to the airwaves, Mr. Pony Cordero. How are you doing, sir?
Hey, what's going on, guys?
Alrighty then. And once again, we have a demonic lion who's going to bite my head off if I say the wrong thing, and I'll never see it coming. LioConvoy, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing all right. Take offense to the demonic part. I am a good boy. I only bite when necessary. How dare you, you monster?
That's true. You just look demonic. You know what I'm gonna do is
it's unsettling. It is unsettling.
You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna cover you in rings of fire and eyes with and then we can call you angelic, and I won't have to change much about your opinion or your appearance. Anyway, is what I meant to say. So, Lio, thanks for coming on so last minute. I know I just got to you like a couple hours ago and told you about the topic. So, the reason why this topic was suggested was because Concert Cruiser had seen a video by Clownfish TV talking about that had roughly the same title, and I should have linked it in the description, but I'll have to go back later and add the thing again. So that discussion is what inspired this. So right before we get into it, let me just give a big shout out to my patrons who help, who make my life a lot easier, and I'm eternally grateful to them, especially those guys on the $10 and up tier. One of them being our friend DJ Skywalker here, the rest of them being Princess Heather Blossom, Shady Oak Ministry, Sid McConroy, Autoknight, Emerald, Spencer, Sodden, Girder, Senko, Jennan, Kellogg, Kyle Christensen, Stephen A. Wilson, Rein-Kun, Princess Sunshine Sparkle, Bootleg Bard, and the Equestrian City Heroverse series. If you guys would like to get on the show, I'd love to have you. We just need you on the Discord for as little as $1 a month. I'm getting better at rolling that off, and it only took me a year. Now then, so of the four of us here, Lio and I are the only ones who actually saw this video. So Lio, would you be so kind as to give us a rundown of what happened in this video, what they talked about, and what that means for tonight's topic, just so anybody who hasn't seen it can be on the same page as us.
Okay, the topic of the video that Clownfish TV covered was whether or not cartoons are still for kids. They cited initially dropped rating data, and they kind of made a correlation without causation necessarily. And then they went on to discuss. They went on some weird tangent about people saying that they're right-leaning. But on top of that, they went on about what their kids prefer to watch or prefer to read, and whether or not kids' cartoons are acceptable in the modern age due to a possible political influence or social influence. And their ultimate argument is kids don't really watch cartoons now because of the data they pulled up. Do you want me to give my thoughts on it first, or do you want me to let you go ahead?
Hold those thoughts for just a second. Let me
Sure.
say this. So, they did initially talk about that there might be a political motivation to it. That a lot of these cartoons will, in one way or another, portray subject matter that most people would deem mature. So that begs a multifaceted question here of, can kids handle something that's more mature? Or is it just a matter of the demographics of the show being more inclusive, which, if anything, was, happenstance pioneered by Friendship is Magic, that had a very wide age demographic appeal to it, which was intentional at the time as well. So is it just having a wider appeal, giving the audience more credit, or should there be a line in what we talk about in a kid's cartoon? Like, do we need to see everybody's romantic interests, and do we need to see everybody's political opinions, things like that? So that's kind of the ultimate question of tonight. So, Lio, do you have any more thoughts along those lines before we move on?
Oh, I think that's a pretty succinct way to describe the video and its contents.
Mm-hmm. So let's ask ourselves this question real quick here. What are we watching these days? So Friendship is Magic is over. That was just about the only thing I was watching. Everything else I watch now is pretty much I just watch it with Heather, or there'll be like a short one series anime that somebody will recommend to me, and I'll play it in the background while I'm doing something else. But DJ, Mau Mau and the Heroes of Pure Heart. I love that show. That's all I watch right now, pretty much. Absolutely nothing political in there, aside that the King character is a little light in the loafers for my taste. But DJ, what are you watching these days?
I'd say the most recent show I've been into is The Owl House from Disney.
Yeah? What's that one about?
It's about a human girl who ends up in a world of magic, and over the summer she is trying to learn magic herself, having to discover new ways of performing it, and finding out the secrets of this world, essentially.
Okay. Anything else?
It's kind of like it's kind of like a updated, kind of like a continuation of Gravity Falls. Even some of the creators are part of the show, so it's kind of fun.
All right. And Cordero, what are you watching these days?
I only watch YouTube compilations of cereal commercials from the 80s and 90s.
Really?
No, it actually has been I've actually watched few cartoons like this year. I was just thinking about like the last cartoons I've watched, but I did watch like Steven Universe, Star vs. the Forces of Evil, Gravity Falls, all the ones that get rave reviews.
Mm-hmm.
My Little Pony, Equestria Girls. Equestria Girls lingered a little longer than My Little Pony did, but that's finally falling off a cliff. Yeah, I like cartoons. I like modern cartoons. I like cartoons that I grew up with. They're still good.
Alrighty then. Real quick, I just updated the description of the video with the link to the Clownfish TV video that we were talking about, and I've also posted it in the live chat. Lio, what are you watching these days?
Well, much to the chagrin of the chat, I'm sure it's nothing really modern. I haven't had the time to delve into too much of that stuff. But the last show I dedicated time to sit down and watch was actually Brave Star. I don't know if anybody here is familiar with that other than me.
Yeah, I
did a video on one of those, didn't he?
Yeah, I remember him doing that, and then I watched a couple episodes myself out of curiosity. That was years ago, though.
Mm-hmm. Bravestar was one of Filmation's last cartoons where they had a really good budget, and they basically gave a middle finger to all of the censorious nonsense they had had to deal with in the early years.
Mm-hmm.
You saw in this show, you saw a child die from drug overdose. You saw a more complex villain than they had been able to deal with in years previously due to government and moral busybody interference.
Mm-hmm.
You had a lot of diversity in the cast. It's a really, really good show with a lot of depth to it that a lot of people don't assume it would have. And frankly, like, I really like 3030 because, like, I've got that same energy in everything I do.
All right. So I'm missing a lot of context there because I haven't seen this show. But that sounds pretty interesting. So now let's ask this question. Of the modern shows that we're watching, the ones that are definitely aimed at kids, you know, we're not how political do they get in terms of something that you wouldn't necessarily have previously expected to be in a kid's cartoon? So I'll just leave the floor open on that one, and whoever wants to talk first, go ahead.
If I may.
Go for it.
Okay, now, while I may not be completely versed in every single modern cartoon, I have personally gone over some of the details in a lot of the modern stuff compared to some of the older stuff, and my argument's probably not going to be something that a lot of people are going to agree with, but I believe I can back it up. I don't necessarily believe that there's more in modern cartoons than there were in older ones. I just think we're more, more cognizant of it. If you look at some of the old cartoons from the 80s and 90s, I mean, there was a lot of talk about, specifically He-Man. They had a specific PSA they would go over in different formats that was all but anti-racism, directly talking about how you shouldn't judge people by how they look. The entirety of Captain Planet is a political statement. Again, this also depends on how you define things as political. If you if you deem things as political based intrinsically on specific values as opposed to movements, then you're going to find something political in just about every single piece of art, because that just tends to be how art operates. Even My Little Pony had one or two political values within it somewhere, because that tends to be how art works. I think the difference is, in some cases, number one, again, I said we're more cognizant of it, but I think sometimes the writing is a little too ham-fisted. Like, say, for old X-Men comics, what they would do is they would give you pieces of stuff. And I know we're talking about cartoons, but I'm just giving an example. They would give you the pieces of a puzzle and give you the ability to solve it to get the correct conclusion. Whereas in some modern cartoons and modern comics, they just, shoot that square peg through the square hole at the speed of light and don't even give you a chance to react. So I think the problem that might come with political aspects in cartoons probably comes down to how it's written as opposed to what the political value is.
Does anybody have anything they want to say to that?
I'm actually surprised. I thought I was going to be out on an island tonight, but we might at least agree to some extent. I might go a little bit further. I don't think that cartoons have gotten more political or more mature over time. And when I say over time, I mean in the near century that cartoons have existed. Mm-hmm. Like, they, I think that the focus shifts from what kind of messages, political or otherwise. I think the focus of adult content shifts a little bit, but I really don't think that it has scaled up at all. But as people get older, it feels like it's scaled up. And also, I'll flip this on its head. I do not think that cartoons are too mature for kids at all. I actually think that cartoons are often too mature for adults. And yes, I will explain that, but I'll let Skywalker go first.
DJ, you got any
being thrown to the wolves here. I feel like I'm being thrown to the wolves.
How dare you enter the Ring of Honor unprepared?
Well, I did want to go like 5 minutes or something,
Yeah.
I think I can branch off of what Leo brought up with the focus shifting.
Okay.
It certainly feels, at least over the last 20 years that I've been watching cartoons, as basically the only thing I've ever watched, has shifted. Mm-hmm. It feels more like it's transferred over from your classic episodic to more story-based, but that's the most obvious bit. But through it, I think it's I think it's focusing on more. How do I word it? More social angles, I want to say, I suppose.
Okay.
Like a lot of the more modern cartoons, you see a lot of discussion of relationships a lot, which you don't really get a whole lot in older cartoons, like from the 2000s and the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe that's just my minimum amount of.
Well, by far, the biggest change that has happened in the last 10 years is that LGBT representation has been going through the roof in terms, well, compared to what it used to be. I mean, there's as far as I've seen, there's at least one in almost every series. Now, whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing is probably a different discussion. But I can say this is that the perception of whether or not it's a good thing can definitely be controversial and divisive. So one of the points that was brought up in the clownfish video and not really talked about in a depth that I would have liked is that, okay, so we've got gay characters in all of our shows now, but by and large, most of the country is either lukewarm about that or is still not ready to have LGBT representation in their shows, and then presenting it to kids like it's normal. There's certain, in my research, there can be some problems with that. So that might be one reason that they said that might be one reason that's why the ratings were going down. It's simply because the kids who are watching don't understand, and it's boring to them, in conjunction with the parents not wanting their kids to be exposed to that lifestyle, or to, you know, whatever that may be. So what do you gentlemen think about that possibilities? Seeing that we've seen a lot more of this type of representation in cartoons over the last couple of years, or, you know, am I even wrong in that regard? You know, I'm making a lot of assumptions here. Hit me with your best shot, guys.
Okay, if I may. I think there's a lot of factors to consider here, obviously. Parental oversight overviewing isn't as prevalent now as it was in days past. And I say that for two reasons. I say that, number one, because most parents have no clue what's on television for their kids, because I am an old man and I'm in the generation that's having kids and they don't have a clue. And secondly, from what I've done online that Brony's aware of, that I'm not going to bring up here for the sake of sanity, parents 9 times out of 10 don't have a clue what's going on in their kids' lives. So more often than not, when you see parents that are upset about like LGBT representation, it's a very, very small minority that just knows how to make a really big fuss. As far as kids go, I don't think it's that they don't get it, because they don't tend to balk at straight couples any more than they would anything else. I think it's just more of, when it comes to story construction, they have to be engaged. And they have to be engaged in multiple different levels, whether it be the animation, the spectacle, the story. It all varies. It also, of course, comes down to demographic. It comes down to what they're aiming for, and the skill of the crew, both in animation, writing, voice acting. There's a lot to it, and it's a very compound issue with a lot of nuance to it. So I think that if there is a decline in children enjoying cartoons, it's likely less to do with what's currently out, probably more likely to do with how divided their attention is between everything else. Because, Brony, how old are you?
I don't like saying my age, but I'm.
Are you younger than me or older than me? Let's say it like that.
We're
35.
We're around the same age.
Okay, so you remember going home, and you might watch cartoons in the afternoon when you get home, and then you go outside and you play and all this other stuff. And we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have the internet. Now these kids, and our gaming systems were nowhere near as complicated as they are now. Like Mario ran and jumped on turtle, Mario machine go burr. But
I wasn't even allowed to have video games. We didn't have video games in my house until I was 15.
The heck? Anyways,
Yeah.
so Now, what do kids have? They have streaming services, multiple streaming services. They have a globalized network of entertainment. They have YouTube. They have highly advanced video games that are very much so engrossing to what they do because they can do it with their friends and they can get on Discord. I think the decline you might see is due to a lot of things demanding their attention. And even me as an adult who I love animation. Just had to say I haven't been able to watch most of it because I'm busy. I get about my own daily business. And kids, while their schedules are less packed, it's filled with more distractions than anything else because kids, their time is leisure time. And it depends on what they want to do. So if they do watch cartoons, it's going to be in a binge. It's not going to be in single episodes that you watch when you come home from school. So they should probably be looking at the data from Netflix, Crunchyroll, Disney Plus, or whatever, as opposed to data from Cartoon Network, Nickelodeon, because again, they also have their own streaming services for these things. So you're probably going to get a better metric from that than you are from the actual channels themselves.
Okay, so you're saying it has nothing to do with the politics and a lot more with the fact that there's just more to choose from, and therefore the law of averages comes in. Is that correct?
Yes, and again, when it comes to the politics, we had them in our cartoons when we were younger. Me specifically.
Yeah, of course. Come to think of it, there was the morals that were given at the end of every episode of G.I. Joe, Transformers, freaking Sailor Moon, for God's sakes, Sonic the Hedgehog. What else? And then if you go back a generation before that, we had Looney Tunes and Disney running literal propaganda. So that's about as political as you can possibly get. So I think DJ definitely had a valid point a few minutes ago when he said that it was a lot less, that there wasn't as much of it, and that the way that it was portrayed and the type of political messaging has changed. So was that correct, DJ?
Yeah.
I can actually challenge that latter part.
All right, go for it.
Okay, you said, DJ, that the type of political content is primarily based on social issues now, yes?
That's what I see.
Okay. I can name you, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 80s cartoons that did the exact same thing. And the reason why I can say they did the exact same thing is because most of the PSAs that Brony just mentioned were concocted not due to them wanting to be cheesy or corny, but when you actually go back and look at metrics and data from that time, you'll find out they did those for a specific reason. Like there's a very well-known, within Thundercats, a well-known PSA Thundercats did about underage drinking. And as an adult, you look back at that, or even younger generation look back at that, why in the world would Thundercats have an anti-drinking PSA? It's from the 80s. Why would they do? It's because underage drinking was an epidemic at the time. It was talking about a social issue. So was anytime G.I. Joe was talking about racism, or He-Man was talking about drug use, or they were talking about trying to find solutions that were nonviolent. They always had social issues to it. They had to veil it a little differently because the social issues were different at the time, but they were still social issues nonetheless.
So what do you think about that, DJ?
I'm trying to figure out how to word it, because those feel a lot different than what I've seen in modern cartoons.
So
so
Lio, from what it sounds like, is talking about issues that were very prevalent at the time. I remember one of them. I think it was from G.I. Joe that was like, and the kids are like, oh, I got a headache. Oh, let's go fish out some medicine. And they didn't know what it was. And they were just going to take whatever was in the cabinet, right? And obviously that could cause some problems for a kid. And everybody knows at least one kid who died like that or had some very serious medical problems. Whereas, let's say, we flip the script to today and assume that what I said earlier is correct. We've still got a lot more LGBT representation than we used to. If you combine all of the LGBT together, like every possible letter that you could add to that alphabet soup, you're still getting less than 1% of the population. So it's not necessarily, and especially if you're aiming it at a prepubescent demographic, you're not going to be hitting an audience that is experiencing these things as a problem. So it almost becomes just more about raising awareness kind of thing. Where so what Lio was talking about could have affected and possibly saved more people back then than what it could have done now. Does anybody disagree with what I just said?
So are you saying the cartoons had a wider audience earlier, so the message was more effective?
No, I'm saying that the message was more applicable to daily life. Something that you were a lot more likely to actually run into. Here's a curious question, because I don't remember very much of my childhood. Lio, did anybody ever listen to those PSAs?
Well, absolutely. Specifically, if you want to bring up a really funny one, there's a PSA from Sonic: The Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog where it's all about not hiding in a dryer. And you're laughing, but it killed people. And when PSAs like that go off to kids, because they recognize these characters as characters they like, characters they trust, their characters they're fond of, that does have a play on them. So that I can't give you data on it, but just colloquially, I understood that every kid in my class knew don't get into a dryer when you're playing hide and seek because, well, Sonic recommends not so because it kills people. And for G.I. Joe, there's a PSA about downed power lines. Not something you deal with in the modern age very often because most of them are underground now. But in the 80s, you did.
Yeah.
So
yes.
So DJ, what part of what you were comparing versus what Lio was talking about, what part of that was different? Do you think you can quantify it?
I suppose I can take example because Cartoon Network actually just put out a PSA exclusively on Twitter using some of their current cartoon people in a PSA for using proper pronouns.
Okay, so we got more LGBT issues.
Yeah, and I know there was another one, but I haven't seen it, so I can't say anything to that PSA. That one came out a couple weeks ago about racism, but I haven't seen it, so I can't use it here. From what I saw in that PSA, it doesn't seem as applicable as to the ones that you guys experienced back in the 80s. Especially to kids. Because I've never seen kids worrying about that.
I may ask a question here real quick. DJ, about what decade are you into life? First, second, or third?
I'm in my 20s.
Okay. I'm going to say this with as much respect as I can. I don't think anybody sitting at this table has a clue what kids deal with on a day-to-day basis.
Unless you have children.
I'm around people that work with children, so I kind of do.
Lio, you're not wrong, but you're not 100% right either. I did used to work in childcare, and
Sure.
like a few years ago, and I've had more than one job in it. So I feel like I have a grasp on it, but I also consciously know that that there might be a Dunning-Kruger effect going on there.
I don't think it's a Dunning-Kruger effect. I think it's that any person, kids specifically, what you see on the surface isn't necessarily what you see in interpersonal interactions. Because, I mean, in school, how many times did you see somebody be a bully to another kid, but when the teacher shows up, the kid's an angel, right? So dynamics and issues happen behind the scenes that adults are flatly not going to be aware of and may never be aware of. So these PSAs may very well be trying to, maybe failing, but trying to speak to things they think are a problem with kids in the modern age. I can't speak to that specifically because the kids I deal with, they're not dealing with pronouns and LGBT issues. They're dealing with far worse things. Mm-hmm. So that's probably what they're trying to get at here. And in and of themselves, I don't think there's a problem with these PSAs. There might be a problem with delivery. But the ones I've seen, they don't seem all that bad. They don't seem very caustic. They're just, honestly, they're kind of milquetoast.
I do have a small rebuttal to that, especially with this PSA. You would have a point if it wasn't only posted on Twitter.
Ooh, that's a good point.
Where kids are not supposed to have access.
That's a fair point.
It is a 13 and up site.
Oh yeah, that's true.
If it is supposed to be targeted at kids, why is it only on Twitter?
Are the
it is
PSAs
on their website? It is. Yes, it is It
They're
is
exclusively
listed as a PSA on their Twitter.
Yes, but is it on their channel as well? Is my question. Do we know?
No, it wasn't even animated. It's just a comic.
Ah, interesting. That's weird.
Well, there's also like I'm sure you guys have seen. Everyone's talked about the Steven Universe PSA that came out where Garnet tells you to not be racist. You guys have seen that, right? That was like
That's the one I mentioned that I haven't seen.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's basically kids playing and one kid is exceptionally racist and Garnet comes out and says, "Don't do that," and then they pose for the camera and then they go with cut and the scene still goes and like the white kid or one of the white kids in the scene is like, "That seems nice, but I mean, like, does anyone really deal with racists?" And then Garnet says, "Oh yes, people do still deal with racism, you stupid privileged white child." And the idea is that after the cut, the PSA is still going, and the little white kid is like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, Garnet, that I said that. I didn't realize that black kids deal with things that I wouldn't understand, not being black." So it's like a double PSA where it like double clutches you. It's like, "Don't be racist. Hang on, for real, don't."
The beginning of it was a parody of the old '80s PSA.
Yeah, it was a parody of the old PSAs, and then it's supposed to be like, "Nah, serious, behind the curtains, stop being racist, kids." But yeah, it seems like PSAs now, they're a little more targeted than they used to be. Like in the '80s and '90s, like with "Don't hide in a dryer" and "Don't talk to strangers," it was more like, "Kids, listen to us or you're gonna die." And PSAs now are more like, "Hey, kids, listen to us so that your life will be better and everyone's lives will be better."
So there's definitely something to be said for the ham-fisted average style that Lio talked about earlier, where they're just so much more explicit with it rather than making the episode about it. Now, so I'll say this, G.I. Joe drives me nuts. However, I would say out of the old 1980s cartoons, it's probably the better of them because of how it tackled its subject matter. It was actually pretty real and pretty complex in a good number of their episodes, and how they found the solution could be applicable to real life. Friendship is Magic, 220 episodes are roughly the same exact thing, with better characters. So then you've got things like what we just talked about with Steven Universe, where it's just ham-fisted like that style, or we get entire episodes of this is what it should be, and it's very preachy rather than weaving it into the narrative. Another example that I can think of is that there was a Gargoyles episode that talked about that showed the issues of gun safety. I remember there was one of the gargoyles, I think it was the fat one, took the police officer's gun and was messing around with it and then actually accidentally shot her with it. Now that is something that like it's subtle, it's woven into the narrative. I could imagine with it, with what I know about child psychology, that if a kid was watching that and said, "Okay, maybe I shouldn't be messing around with guns if I don't know how to use them," kind of thing, because he just watched his favorite character, his first childhood crush, get shot by her own gun, because somebody was messing around with it. Whereas now it's very just, "Don't do this, kids," and it sounds almost condescending. Yeah. But the ultimate question here is, so we've established that there's a different style, which has a lot less to do with motivation and a lot more to do with the talent of the writers themselves. Now, going back to the ultimate question here is it still for kids? Like, let's be honest with ourselves here. How often do we believe kids run into problems like of racism these days?
Well, to quote our resident lion, how the heck would we know? I don't know. It probably depends on the region and the school. I bet there's a lot of schools where you run into almost zero, and there's probably places where it's rampant, where it's the primary source of bullying is racism. So I don't know. I can't really speak to how relevant racism is for kids in school.
DJ, do you have any insight?
I never hear it spoken about, but that really doesn't say much, does it?
Yeah.
I have one place I know they deal with it.
Tell me.
Factually. Any video game lobby.
Well, yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Is that racism? Is that racism or just edgelord?
I don't put them in different baskets in that case. If you have to make racist statements to be an edgelord, you need better material, my dude. But I will say, any of these PSAs that we cover, I will take them, and I think kids should take them any day over Cartoon All Stars to the Rescue.
Oh God, I'm missing context here.
Okay,
That was that massive crossover one from the 80s, wasn't it?
Here's the context. The government basically put out a multi-cartoon character movie-length PSA about how drugs are bad, and it involved such stunning characters like Garfield, Little Miss Piggy, and Kermit from Muppet Babies, Alf, and Michelangelo.
Oh jeez.
Yeah, it was basically like the biggest collab since Avengers Endgame. Like imagine every cartoon character you've ever seen as a kid coming on screen at the same time to tell you not to do drugs. It was friggin' a trip in itself.
Right, and
All the turtles they had to pick.
Cordero, you and I have had conversations off air about how, if anything, that just made more people get interested in drugs.
The DARE program, yes. Specific drug PSAs like that for kids, I'm not sure the efficacy is that, but I will say that the DARE program was a massive failure.
All right, so right now we're coming to an inconclusive as to whether or not these themes are in fact still for kids. So let's ask the next.
They're for kids. I'll say it.
Okay.
I'll come out on it. They're still for kids. They're presented for kids, and that's totally fine.
Yeah. And so then it just becomes a matter of how successful it is. Is it reaching its demographic, and is it actually portraying, or conveying is the right word, the message that they want?
Yeah. What is the efficacy of the message is the question, not are you successfully targeting them to kids. I think they're fine. They're not like inappropriate. I don't think any kids are getting traumatized by being told not to be racist by Garnet.
Does anybody disagree with that?
No, not at all.
All right. I would say I wouldn't fully disagree. If they're putting it in the right channels, if they're putting it like on a platform that a kid is most likely going to be watching, like not Twitter, YouTube, Netflix, cable, something like that, then
that was really funny.
Yeah, that can definitely reach the group. Now, whether or not they heed that, whether or not it's portrayed in a way that they'll understand is a different story. I feel like that the motivation behind it is projecting. I feel like the motivation is like they're certainly not going to change anybody's mind with these things. They're the only outcome is that it's going to be like, okay, I watch cartoons to get away from this kind of thing. I don't want to deal with it here too. Or they already agree with it and they're just going to be like, preach it, sister, it's just two different levels of obnoxiousness. So the next question is, do we give kids media more credit for what they can handle in terms of subject matter? Like, can it get more mature without it being too much, or is there a line? And if so, where is the line? I'll leave the floor open for this one.
Okay, so we were talking about are the messages and PSAs in cartoon too mature, and now we switch to is the content of the cartoon itself too mature?
Correct.
Yeah, I have things to say about this, but I heard someone else chime in.
That was me, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
As someone who grew up on specifically the Batman animated and Superman animated shows, I know that kids can handle some darker themes and some more mature subject matter. But some of the stuff today, especially with shows like Steven Universe, She-Ra, even Owl House, sometimes it doesn't seem like they're focusing on mature subject matter. Sometimes it feels like it's focusing on sexual subject matter, which I know as an American I'm pretty blind to that. But
So DJ, I'm glad you said it because I didn't want to say it. So go ahead.
Yeah, I'm here to be. Brony's beating me up today, apparently.
No, I'm just using you as a human shield because I couldn't.
Figures.
I hadn't yet thought of a way to broach the sexual conduct aspect of it yet. I'd been thinking about it the whole time, and then you just out and said it, and I'm like, oh, this is awfully convenient. So
well, why don't you take over, Brony? Why don't you take over?
No, I cut you off in the middle of the sentence.
He doesn't want to be accused of transphobia by that one guy again.
I got you. I got your back, DJ. We're in this together.
It doesn't feel like it, but okay.
We got this. We got this together.
While I'm up front and you're in the back. But yeah, it feels like it's the wrong kind of mature level. There are some shows that do it well. Like, I will give Adventure Time a ton of credit for aging with its audience, considering it did last for 10 years. But and My Little Pony, which kept itself pretty stable throughout the rest of them. But the obvious ones come to mind are usually Steven Universe, She-Ra, which focused on a lot more of the sexual themes. At least that's what usually is what you always hear about.
Well, that's the LGBT.
There's not a whole lot else to the shows, at least in my opinion. Like, especially with Steven Universe, in my opinion, there's really not a lot there.
Okay, yeah. So that's the LGBT representation that I was talking about earlier. Is that it becomes the defining trait of this character, and is that. We just got to ask ourselves as a society, how much do we care about that being shoved in the face of kids? Now, me personally, I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's good, especially if you're putting sexual themes, even if they're not explicitly shown in front of kids. You're introducing them to stuff that they're not ready for. So that's ultimately my problem with it. And at that point, it seems to me like somebody who's outside looking in that they're doing it for themselves. The creators of this are trying to justify their own lifestyles because they can't justify it to the rest of society, or they still feel like they're oppressed by the rest of society. So what do you guys think about that? So DJ said that's what it looks like, and I just told you how it feels like, how I interpret it as a conservative Christian. So what do you guys think about that?
I'm gonna sidestep all of it laterally with this. You guys are correct that the tone has shifted slightly. So like older cartoons, and we think like 80s and 90s nostalgia, older cartoons were very much violence and sex appeal. Modern cartoons are very much sexuality and violence. And I don't think that either focus, while the focus have switched, I don't think that either focus is more or less harmful to kids. I think that cartoons now and in the past and in the 1930s were fine for kids, and it's all still fine for kids. If you remember earlier, I made a point that I think that cartoons are fine for kids, but too mature for adults. Would you like me to explain that now?
Please do.
Okay, so all of the every adult theme you could imagine, any mature subject matter, we've seen in animation since the history of animation. You can pull up examples from Bugs Bunny to old animations, and of course now they've always been super adult and deal with these adult themes. The problem is that adults, as we get older, and there's several people over 30 in this conversation, as we get older, we notice the adult themes in those cartoons a lot more than we did as kids. And they seem worse to us, but there's a giant difference between fully grown adults and children. And that is existential dread or existential crisis. Children do not experience existential dread. Adults do. So when we look, I'll give a violent example. So when we look at a cartoon, if a cartoon has a man being dangled over a volcano and slowly lowered down into the volcano until it finally catches him on fire and he explodes in flames, kids watching that will go, ha ha, guy go boom. Adults will watch that and they'll be able to relate to the idea of being held over fire to your impending doom, facing your non-existence or whatever it is in the afterlife, and understanding the pain and torment, both mentally of facing your doom and the physical pain of being lit on fire. Adults understand that, and we see that, and we go, oh, like that affects us more. But for kids, ha, guy go boom. There's no existential dread in kids. And because of that, I think the children are actually better equipped to handle these adult themes. And the magic of cartoons is they're able to present it in a cartoony or a way that's not overly graphic or gruesome. Because cartoons have always dealt with death, sexuality, and all these hard things to deal with, but it's done in a cartoony way. The children understand on a base level what's going on. That guy died. Those people are in love. Those people had sex. They get all that stuff, and they understand it at a young age, but they don't experience the existential dread that adults do. And they don't have a base understanding of sexuality from their own standpoint because they haven't had hormone flushes yet and puberty yet. So when kids look at it, they're like, oh, I know what that is, but it doesn't traumatize them or affect them the way we think it does because we're looking back at it through our adult brains and trying to apply our adult perspective to the children's perspective and assuming it's harming them. It does not. Cartoons have always been fine, and they're still fine. They're just cartoons.
Ooh, that's a mouthful. No, that's.
I was ready at the opening with that. I've been holding that in.
Yeah, it's geez. So here's a little bit of insight for everybody. I've said this before, but Cordero and I hang out in real life. Sometimes we play Smash together, and one of his favorite characters is Little Mac, and one of his favorite things to do is sit on the corner of the stage and charge up the attack and wait for you to come close and then knock you off. That's what he just did.
I can't do that against good players.
Yeah, well, you're not wrong. So, I don't think not having the tool to process it is the same as being better equipped. I just think it hits, yes, you're right. It does hit harder when you understand it from a more mature aspect. In terms of damaging, that's certainly, I mean, in what we understand as kids Western animation, you're definitely right. There's, probably not very many examples of someone that's been legitimately traumatized by a cartoon. That being said, I wouldn't sit a 5-year-old down and have them watch Akira. And that was the other part of the question here is there a line where it becomes too much for kids, where it does become too explicit? I believe that there is. I'm willing to talk, I'm willing to have a non-PSA episode about any given social or political issue. I would like it to be well written and into the narrative and not just beat you over the head with it. I would like it to be balanced at least to a degree. Like in Friendship is Magic, in most of the episodes, especially in the middle seasons, there were two opposing but equal viewpoints on how to handle the situation. I'm going to try to speak vaguely here because Lio probably has not seen the episode where Rainbow Dash gets considered to join the Wonderbolts team, but then she has to leave the Ponyville team for the Olympics. That Twilight never beat Rainbow Dash over the head and said, if you do this, you're a bad person. She just went up to her and said, if you do this, these will be the consequences, but, you do whatever you feel like you need to do. So and that left the character in a situation where they had to figure it out, and thus the audience had to figure it out with them. That's what I want in my cartoons. But when it gets too explicit, when you're for no reason, you've got a gay couple kissing in the last episode just to stick it to the man, because that's what it is. That's what it has been explicitly in every single instance of that. It's just, we're going to do it because they can't cancel us. It's the last episode. That is those are two very different things. Now it's not for kids anymore. Now you're just making a political statement because you feel you have to. It can also be like, and like I said earlier, I would not take a 5-year-old and show them Akira. They will have nightmares for weeks.
They might.
Yeah, I mean, and I've been a PE teacher. I've run after-school karate programs. I know what it's like to traumatize a kid. That is not the kind of. I've had kids come up to me, like, see me on the street years later and go, "Sensei Brony, what are you doing here?" But that's not the type of trauma that I'm willing to roll the dice on. Do you guys understand what I'm getting at here? I know I've been rambling for a little while.
I hear you.
All right, so here's my value.
Okay.
As far as portraying gay couples and whatnot, I don't see the issue because nobody has concerned themselves enough with straight couples in cartoons either. I didn't hear anybody raise Cain about Sailor Moon and Tuxedo Mask. I didn't hear anybody raise Cain about the SWAT cats in Cali. I didn't hear anybody raise Cain about Flint and Lady J. So when it comes to really base level, like relationship stuff, like holding hands, hugging, kissing, that's something they're going to see in reality. That's not a problem. If we get, and you guys have made a delineating line here between relationships and sexuality, but I think when sexuality is covered in cartoons, if it is, it's very, very milquetoast. They didn't sit there, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. They didn't sit there and have an entire episode of Catra and Adora talking about what they like to do in the bedroom. They do.
Oh, you meant the good episodes.
No, but they do flirty, goofy couple type stuff that would be no different if it was a boy and a girl to anybody else. It wouldn't even hit their radar. If it was actual sexuality, like something you would see in one of John Kay's more adult ventures, like say from the Ren and Stimpy adult party cartoon, that would be a hard no. And the reason why that would be a hard no is because neurologically it can cause damage to a child to be subjected to sexual things at a young age. And here's why. Ultimately, of course, Brony and I believe Cordero, I think his name is, I think went to a degree, we all share a faith. So we understand that even though we're created in the image of God, we're also still to a degree animals. And here's the hard truth about what kids can handle versus what they cannot handle. Every living being, by the time it's born to gaining sentience, understands death exists. Death is always a possibility. There's a reason why kids can handle certain levels of violence at a young age, because every living creature is susceptible to it, as opposed to sexual contact, which only is acceptable in nature once they've reached physical and sexual maturity. So violence is less of a problem to me. And the reason why I can say that is twofold. Number one, we have the biological argument. But even when you look at other cartoons, one of my favorite Japanese cartoons is Fist of the North Star. And everybody here, I'm sure, knows what that is, right?
Nani?
Okay.
Yes.
It's a very violent cartoon where a 6-foot-tall Bruce Lee punches people and they explode. It was also a child's property.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, Japan has very different standards from America.
Matter.
Okay.
It doesn't matter in this case because, Ronnie, if you look at even some of the Batman comics from the 80s, when comics were far more direct to the kids, there's still higher levels of violence that you would find than compared to a cartoon, as well as like even compared to Fist of the North Star. You get the serial killer Zaz on one issue, and you've got bodies everywhere. What the difference is the level of violence and what kids can handle. Because kids tend to be very soft in the brain because of neuroplasticity, which is actually what I believe Cordero was referring to when he talked about what kids could or could not handle. They're able to take on subjects more than we think they are, despite the fact that they're fragile in certain ways. Like, obviously, you can't, like, judo throw a kid as hard as you can when you're an adult on the ground. That's going to literally break the kid. But when it comes to media, they are able to handle and digest more than we usually think they're able to, but it varies from kid to kid. So when it comes to violence, it's a much greater scale they can handle than, say, sexual nature things. But when it comes to sexual nature things, my value is always this. And it's this because I'm an absolute prude, even in a media that's directed towards adults. I don't want to see no sex, man. That ain't what I'm about. If I'm watching a giant robot show, because I want to watch the giant robot show punch a giant monster or another giant robot. And it's the same way when it comes to other cartoons.
So what you're saying, if I'm understanding you correctly, you seem to be saying that violence is better. If you got to portray something explicit, violence is less damaging than sex because there's a way for the brain to differentiate that's not real violence versus a sexual stimulant being the same regardless of whether or not did I understand you correctly? Okay, so
let me reiterate.
Okay,
the human brain at that age, it understands death. Like implicitly, it understands death, but because of a lack of maturity sexually, they don't understand that. So you expose them to that, it can damage their brain. But violence,
that I knew.
But violence, unless it is extreme, won't do that level of damage. So they're able to comprehend it because every living being understands it can and will eventually die. And for any organism, the possibility of dying young is kind of built into our DNA. So kids are able to handle that a lot more. If I had to choose between, if I had little Timmy as a kid, I had a choice between him watching the beginning of End of Evangelion versus the Fist of the North Star movie. It's going to be the Fist of the North Star movie any day of the week.
Okay. Well, also, Fist of the North Star is arguably good. Evangelion can't
agree.
I
agree.
Oh boy, that's a whole nother debate in itself. But I don't care about that. But yeah, kids are pretty adept at dealing with violence, which is. But what was I going to say? Oh yeah, and that's to your point. That's why most children's media is really, really good at portraying violence in a cartoony way, at least for animation that's designed for children. Really, really good at presenting it in a cartoony way so that kids can digest it without being traumatized by the gore or whatever. But I really think that cartoonists are also really talented at cartoonifying sexuality. Now, we seem to have been conflating sexuality with just raw on sex, but sexuality is anything from just showing some cleavage to stockings being rolled up to like the cat calling. Any cartoon you can think in your head of a million Looney Tunes cartoon references to sexuality, and that's what I mean when I say sexuality, and that's usually how children's media portrays it. You don't see a lot of bedroom scenes, like sex bedroom scenes, in children's media, but they do imply that sex occurs and that sexuality is a thing. And I think that children are equipped to handle that level of presentation of sexuality just as they're equipped to handle cartoonified violence, because cartoon creators do a pretty good job of that. And if a cartoon does have explicit sex in it, on almost every circumstance, that's a cartoon that it was designed for adults. Even on the Japan side, Japan is pretty good at cartoonifying the sexuality for stuff that is aimed at kids. And I think that for the average adult, whatever age you or the average adult thinks that a child should be able to handle certain material, like whatever age you think a child should be able to handle certain material, whether it's porn, sexuality, violence, gratuitous violence, take that age that's in your mind and subtract 5 years. And that is the actual age that it's presented to them, or that they consume it in some form. And that is also the actual age that they're able to handle it, in my opinion. And that is the actual age that you experienced it. Because I feel like adults get, let me finish real quick. I feel like adults get amnesia and forget what age they first experience violence, sex, sexuality, explicit violence, explicit sex. We all forget what age we experienced that, and I'll bet it's a lot younger, about 5 years younger than that magical age in your mind that you think a child should be able to experience those things.
I'm going to disagree on that because I've read,
and those aren't all the same age, obviously. Those things I was listening.
Right, but I've read numerous studies on the damage that porn can do to a young mind.
I agree. That's why that one would be higher than the others.
Right, and even an adult mind. Okay, so if you...
But still 5 years sooner than you think. Whatever age you think kids can handle porn, they're seeing it 5 years sooner than that. So that's the reality.
Right, well, those are not mutually exclusive concepts. When somebody is first introduced to somebody, and when something is first introduced to somebody versus
when it can do damage.
Yeah, those are irrelevant factors. It's just life happens.
Well, they're not competing factors. They're both true.
Right. Okay. So we're on the same page there, which is good at least. Does anybody have anything to say about any of this before we move on?
I mean, if I had kids, I ain't putting them on the freaking internet. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah.
you can try. They'll find it.
No, they won't.
I've read.
You are getting dial-up phones. What you getting, boy?
Put them in an actual bubble. They roll around like American gladiators.
Let me paraphrase a story I read for you one time. It was by a guy who was getting into IT and is like top of the. I read this story off Reddit, but it's like he's like going into the top of the line, cutting edge technology IT fields right now, and he got started on that because his father tried to restrict his computer usage and his internet access, and he would just tinker with the computer until he found a way around whatever blocks. And the more restrictive his father got, the more creative he got. So that should be Lio, I know you don't have children right now, but if you ever did, let that be a cautionary tale.
Going out into the woods.
Maybe he wants to develop the ultimate programmer. Put the obstacle in place, and give
away my secrets.
Oh,
the kid has to learn how to program to find the porn.
Oh yes, the Princess Celestia method.
Exactly.
All right.
Toss them in the deep end; they'll fly.
Yeah. So my theory of whether or not it's still for kids largely depends on the intentions of the author. Did they want it to be aimed at kids, or did they want to circle jerk? I think that's how I can summarize everything that I think in all the convoluted rambling that I've done tonight. Now let's talk about the video itself. So let's go back to Clownfish for a minute here. And so Lio, you had some issues with that video. Can you summarize them for us?
Okay, my summary is I think they make a lot of correlation without causation. I think they make a lot of claims that they did not substantiate, and going to go ahead and put my cards on the table. It is absolutely stupid that they're going on about, well, they're trying to push agendas, and I don't want my kids to watch that, but I'm going to give them the Demon Slayer manga when that has sexuality in it too, my dudes, like almost bare titty and a lot of pillow talk type stuff in it and a lot of violence. So if you're trying to get away from exposing your kids to that and you give them the Demon Slayer manga, you're probably a moron.
Oh, geez. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that when I listened to it this morning, but I think you're right. Okay, so what? I don't
want my kid around this lion. Let me throw him in with a tiger.
Yeah. Why? What? Can you give us an example of correlation and causation? And does this take away any validity from some of the points that they were making?
Yeah, their correlation versus causation, or correlation into causation, was we were talking about the downward tick in viewership, and they gave a chart that actually charts an entire decade of kids not watching Cartoon Network. And part of the argument is, well, maybe it's about streaming service and whatnot, but they try to make the argument that it's primarily about the cartoons that are on there, and kids aren't interested in this, kids aren't interested in that, because my kids aren't interested in that. And here's the thing. Here's an example. Brony and I are close to the same age. Brony can't stand half the cartoons I love because it's not his cup of tea. Trying to gauge whether or not kids are into these cartoons by whether or not your kids are is a really, really goofy metric.
Also, according to my parents, I used to watch like 5 hours of TV a day when I was late elementary school early middle school. I don't remember anything I watched. So, yeah.
Also, Brony likes 3 cartoons, and none of them are on the air anymore. Boomer.
I can't talk about that.
Well, no, that's not true. Mau Mau and the Legends of Pure Heart is a lot of fun. That show makes me frickin' bust a gut.
Okay,
It hasn't been canceled yet.
Yeah, it's gonna get canceled though. I mean, it's just like Dan Versus. But
It's an action show on a Cartoon Network.
Yeah, that's true. So yeah, continue what you were saying, Lio.
No, that's just. Here's the thing about Clownfish, and I was actually even cited in one of their videos because I talked to Kenyon about there were rumors closer to a year ago that Thundercats Roar was canceled, and I said, well, here's some evidence that might lead credence to that, but we don't have anything official. And thankfully, he kept the video to what we did have. But unfortunately, they also make a lot of grand statements about cartoons and the industry that they can't substantiate. And honestly, I just wish they'd shut up about She-Ra. They've done like 70-something videos about She-Ra, and I'm just tired. Stop!
Well, if it's not She-Ra, it's Disney with them.
At least, okay, I can understand Disney. You want to know why I can understand Disney? Because Kenyon wrote for the Donald Duck comics.
Oh, wow.
I get that. So, that I'm cool with. Like, look, Disney was his bread and butter. He wants to talk trash about Disney. I mean, I'm not going to stop a man from talking trash about Disney. I prefer that it be factual because that's my value. But, like, everything else, it's just, they're almost like the quartering light, which is a problem because the quartering's an idiot. So a light version of an idiot, still something of an idiot. They're more reputable than a lot of these other grifters. But they're just still not something I would go with. I'm pleasant with them. I won't not be. But even when I talk to Kenyon, I'm like, cards on the table. I don't like your channel, and I think you do too much clickbaity garbage.
DJ, did you watch that video as well?
I skimmed through it.
Oh,
I do watch Clownfish on the regular.
Yes,
so I have that fanboy defense burning in me from what Leo's saying, but that's not valid. So,
well, can you pull anything out of that is valid? Do you have anything objective that you can counter what he just said with? So if you're a fan,
I think they make a lot of.
If you're a fanboy,
go ahead.
if you're a fanboy, then you probably watch a lot of their stuff, and you more or less may probably agree with it. So. If Lio disagrees, then why exactly?
I do think he's not wrong about their assumptions, but I believe a lot of what they come up with is from their experience that more often than not probably happens behind closed DMs and whatnot. Because I've seen plenty of people on Tumblr who get their hate mail and they'll post it sometimes, but a lot of it they'll just keep to themselves. So I do believe that what they have experienced isn't wrong, but that is personal experience and personal anecdotes. So,
all right.
I believe that's where a lot of the assumptions grow from.
Yeah, I'm not talking about what they say, well, I've encountered XYZ thing on a personal level. They make broad, sweeping generalizations that they cannot back. And they're not saying, this is my personal experience. They're saying, this is that. Like, one example is one of their She-Ra videos, they were talking about whether or not He-Man was going to be in it. They go on some asinine tangent about how, well, you can't have He-Man in it because he'd have to be, like, submissive to She-Ra because, he's got to be a male ally and all. I'm just like, where are you getting this from? The reason why He-Man's not going to be in a new She-Ra is because those rights between He-Man, She-Ra, Masters of the Universe are between, like, 4 different companies. It is a quagmire to get through. Like, where are you getting this? Did you even talk to anybody who knows dick all about He-Man?
Yeah, that's true, but I also feel like there would be a political.
I feel like they do have a point of what would happen with his character.
Yeah,
from what I have seen from She-Ra.
You have assumptions, you don't have evidence.
So, it's YouTube.
That does not.
That's not a good argument, but I will say this: we could ask the question about the creator's track record. Do they, how do they feel about He-Man the character, and how would they treat? Right, but that's the question we would have to ask, and maybe we can deduce something or make some educated guesses based on things from the past. I don't know the creators. last I heard about the She-Ra creators was that they actually didn't like She-Ra, so they were using it as an excuse to push what they wanted She-Ra to be, which is
so it's like the Star Trek writers.
yes,
no.
Well, if that is true, let me just finish this. If that is true, that would play into my ultimate theory of no, this is not for kids. But go ahead, Lio.
Okay. Noelle Stevenson. While it is true that she had never watched the original She-Ra cartoon, there has to be some information here that people have got to look at and understand. She did not show up at DreamWorks and say, "Give me a She-Ra cartoon." What happened was DreamWorks commissioned her, went to her, and said, "We want you to do a pitch for She-Ra." So she took basic story elements, things even James Eatock got to look at the story Bible for. And for anybody who knows anything about 80s cartoons, James Eatock is a He-Man historian. And they got basic concepts together. They don't have time to sit there and watch 129 episodes of a cartoon before they work on a new one. Against my personal values, absolutely. The things that she has said negative about the original She-Ra is primarily from her cast, the voice cast primarily, where they think that the original voice actors were too stilted and they made derogatory comments about that. From Noelle herself, I have yet to see anything from her directly where she says that she hates the original She-Ra and she is doing this to push her values. While it might be true that she might push personal values in this because it is part of her work, and any artist or writer will do that, including people sitting in this call if they do anything in that field. The idea of it was usurped is inaccurate. It was handed to her and they asked her to do a pitch. It was not something that she took over out of spite.
Yeah, so she wasn't a She-Ra fan or an expert on She-Ra, but was commissioned to do the project.
Correct.
Yeah,
Okay,
so
now
she's doing her job to the best of her ability, but people think that, oh, she's not a She-Ra fangirl, so she must hate it.
Okay, so
Right.
I have been a victim of the telephone game here. So thank you for clearing that up for me, Lio.
I clear one more thing up, please.
Sure.
Okay. There is an ongoing rumor, and I want you to be aware. I think everybody should know here.
Mm-hmm.
I have no love of Thundercats Roar. Period. Zilch, zilch, nada. But
Does anyone?
there are a few. But there is a rumor that had been going around since the initial launch trailer that the show head, Victor Courtwright, said in the interview that he hated the original show and he was making this one despite his brothers. I don't know where people are getting this idea from. Anytime I challenge them on it, they freak out. That was never stated. Victor, despite being a complete clown, in my opinion, genuinely was surprised when nobody liked his take. That was actually covered in an interview. The dude, I don't think, did it out of malice. I think, I think he's stupid. I don't think he really understands why people like the original show. He saw nothing but comedy out of it, and they got this garbage from it. I hate things like Roar, but what I hate more than that is misinformation that causes more damage, because then it makes you look stupid when you propagate it.
So it sounds like what we're witnessing in the current generation here is a trend of a stylistic trend of how we adapt older intellectual properties and change them. Well, I'm just going to say it again from that stylistic standpoint. I'm trying not to be redundant here, and I'm failing. So and then we played that game of telephone where the voice actors from one cartoon said something about the voice actors from the old cartoon, and that got attributed to the producers of the show, and then misquoted a whole bunch, and telephone down the line, the message gets muddled down. And then we apply that same sentiment of what we learned from this one show to everything else that looks similar.
Right.
Does anybody have any issues with the theory I just posted?
I don't think so, but I also didn't quite get it.
Okay, so this happened. This thing happened in one show. Therefore, every show that looks similar to this one show where it happened, it must apply there as well. But it didn't even happen in the first show originally. We just think it did because the message got changed too many times as the story changed hands.
Yep.
Oh, okay, yeah. And also like that guy who made the Thundercats Go or whatever. It sounds like he was a victim of, because you said he got a lot of comedy out of the original show. It sounds like he was a victim of seeing the memes and the jokes people made about the original Thundercats and thought, "Oh, that's the show." But if you watch the actual show of Thundercats, it took itself pretty seriously, and that's kind of where the humor derived from. Is people were like, "Oh, some of this stuff they're taking seriously is pretty funny."
Yeah, but that's the thing with fiction, and nobody wants to address it because they don't want to quote unquote degrade what they like. But any fiction, when you take it and you apply reality to it, is absurd. It is goofy. It cannot be taken seriously, including whatever you guys may like or whatever the audience might like. Berserk is hardcore serious. It does not play games. You take Berserk and apply reality to it, it is the goofiest, dumbest thing in the freaking world. Yeah. Why is this man running around with a giant 6-foot sword? It's asinine. But fiction's point is to be absurd and to take itself seriously. So I don't know where this guy got his idea from. I don't hate him for it. I just wish that Warner Brothers would stop sucking at how they handle this property. But that's the joys of corporatism. What they see is we made an investment buying this years ago, and we want money for what we bought. So what they do is they try to follow trends, and they try to back things up. They don't care for the artistic integrity of the original show creators or showrunners. All they care about is, will this make more money? How do I try to get it to make money? And, oh, my God, we don't know what we're doing. Like, for example, for Thundercats specifically, where did Thundercats air in the world, primarily?
The U.S. and Canada?
USA and Brazil, and parts of France. So when Kinetic Studios did a massive, like, $1,000 Thundercat statue, and it was really cool looking, of Lino fighting Mum-Ra, you know where Warner Brothers demanded they license it to be sold in?
Japan.
Southeast Asia.
Sure.
So where Laos and Vietnam and Thailand and things like that, where people don't have the money.
I just don't have the money. They've never even seen the cartoon.
Yeah. That's pretty funny. Why? Why did they do that?
They're stupid. Like, I don't have any other excuse other than somebody who's in marketing is literally mentally stunted and don't know what to do with this property. There's I can't think of any other reason.
That's some Harmony Gold mess ups right there.
Could you imagine being the guy in your Laotian town, and you're like the richest guy in the city, and you see this $1,000 statue and you just buy it to flex on people, and then people come to your house like, "Oh, that's a nice statue. What is it? I don't know."
It cost $1,000 though.
That would be funny, except for the fact that they couldn't even get enough pre-orders to put the dumb thing in production.
But hey, they got the license. They're allowed to.
It's happened like 5 different times where they'll give the license, which is apparently absurd in price. Because as much as I love Thundercats, it's nowhere big as He-Man, G.I. Joe, or Transformers. But they seem to think it's going to take that much money. So
Thundercats. I would argue Thundercats got bigger in syndication because Thundercats had way longer syndication run than those other cartoons, despite them being bigger.
Well, that's because it got bought by Warner Brothers and put on Cartoon Network for the original Toonami run, but blah blah blah. But the thing is, like, they have had so many people pick up the license and then produce nothing because of all the restrictions they put on it. Like, there's a Studio Z is a model kit company, and they were going to put out Thundercat model kits, like statue type model kits. They weren't even allowed to use the character names. They didn't produce anything.
Yeah,
it's insane. But I think I've gone on too long for this specific thing, so I'll stop here.
In that case,
this is free, man, and hurrah!
We got to address Cal back here. Niccolo Colaleo is not, never had been part of Thundercats' Roar. I know he said that he hated the original cartoon. But he's not in staff of the cartoon at all.
Yeah. Also, Winston Churchill hated Thundercats. Did you know that? Just couldn't stand it.
Oh, jeez.
Relevant.
All right, so let's move on to the audience participation segment. So if this is your first time tuning in, I'm noticing we're having a little bit like a slightly higher than normal viewer turnout, which is very nice. So if this is your first time tuning in, here's what we do. I've been reading the chat to the best of my ability throughout the stream here and taking down the interesting comments and questions that I've seen in that time, and I hope my co-hosts have been doing the same in case there's something that I've missed here. We're going to read them out, and if you have any additional comments or questions, now's the time to get them out here. So Jonah Tex Hex said, Western animation is trying to imitate anime and some mixed in with woke.
Correct. Yeah.
I disagree, and here's why I disagree. First and foremost, anime wouldn't have existed without freaking Uncle Scrooge comics, so that's a circular cycle that keeps feeding into it. And here's the killer for the latter part: define woke.
I think that the typical definition of woke is the social justice warrior kind of left leaning, maybe even hard left leaning mentalities that you tend to see on Twitter. It used to be Tumblr, but it migrated over to Twitter kind of thing. So those ideologies.
Well, the thing is, sorry, go ahead.
I would say the most unbiased or unweighted definition of woke would be being sensitive to issues that are important to at-risk populations. That's kind of a general definition of woke that's not politically.
Here's the problem with trying to define woke. Anytime you do, it is too broad, it is not specific enough, and can be applied to anything, and it can be considered woke. I can take the definition you gave, and I can put it on the original My Little Pony cartoon, and it can be considered woke.
Are you telling me that people move the goalpost? That doesn't happen.
I'm telling you that when you make a descriptor like that, you have to have it very well defined. Otherwise, and that's the problem with saying woke, is that it doesn't have a solid definition, so it can be applied to anything. So that's why I reject the word altogether. Yeah,
and if you define it any harder, you like start taking a stance, is the thing, because that often happens.
It sounds like that's why I go with what is most typically like the typical modern connotation of these slang terms, because when I say these things, you know what I mean. You know what it means. If you want to sit there and define it like that, now you're getting into legalism, which stunts a conversation.
Yeah, we'll call Dr. Wolf if we need that.
No. Don't get in with him. That will not end well.
God, the resounding no. I didn't know y'all. I've never had a problem with the man. Why does everybody else hate him so much? Okay,
I don't hate him. I just like making fun of him.
Yeah, okay.
I have a very high personality. I can tell you right now, we're not going to get along.
Yeah. I know. So Paladin Pony T says, "Are there any animes that you've seen that might be for kids?" Well, by Cordero's definition, all of them, because kids are more mature than adults.
I have two. Raijin O. It's about a school that turns into a giant like mech, so that's freaking rad. And The King of Braves, Gao Gai Gar. Both fantastic anime, both fantastic for kids.
Samurai Pizza Cats.
Also good.
Yep.
Sergeant Toad, Dragon Ball Z. And those are the first two that come to mind.
Pika Demos says older cartoons catered to the adults a bit as well, and some of them actually made kids ask their parents what something meant. So does anybody disagree?
Kinda. I think modern cartoons do that too. It's hard to decide what that value would be if you're not a parent. That's why it's a little difficult.
I mean, I can go from experience. I rarely ask my parents what anything meant while watching a cartoon. I really think it depends on the personality of the kids. Like, there's some kids that everything they see in media, they immediately go to their parents. What's this? What's this? What's that mean? What's that mean? But then there's other personalities like me that when you grow up that you don't want to involve your parents. You just kind of want to figure it out, or you just get it in context. So that's really specific to the kid, rather than they're going to bother their parents for explanation.
Or they just skip over it.
Yeah, just I don't care. I don't know what's going on, but I don't care.
Mm-hmm. Oh, look, Batman punched someone again. Fun. Let's see here. Oki Aohara / Silver Sky says, don't forget She-Ra had an openly autistic character and actually talked about how you work with someone like that. So did anybody see this episode of She-Ra with the autistic character? Because autistic characters are pretty difficult to portray in any kind of media, because there's such a spectrum to it, and the personalities vary just as much. So I'd be interested in knowing how that execution went down.
I didn't see it. So
Yeah, but nobody else has seen it. So I mean,
I don't think so, yeah.
that's interesting. And
I got callback here.
yeah, go ahead.
To me, someone who says the original Thundercats is for old people has to believe the same thing about all those Disney films. Your kids won't like Snow White because it's for old people. Yeah, I feel you on that complaint. Like I can tell you that my nieces freaking love all Disney princesses, whether it's Elsa or like Sleeping Beauty. Like it just people who are good at making stuff that relates to kids, especially that's fantasy. They've been good at it for 100 years. So like I hate people who are like, oh, that's a cartoon for old people. Like 60 years ago, they knew how to attract kids' attention and tell a really cool, fantastical fairy tale that relates. So that's one of the worst arguments I've ever heard. But I have heard people say that, and they're dumb.
I remember getting picked on in middle school. Like, oh, you listen to the Beatles? My freaking grandpa listens to the Beatles. And then,
Yo, the Beatles slap. Shut up.
No, they don't.
I'll actually add to that. My nieces like Disney princesses, Thundercats, and Voltron, the original.
Alrighty then.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see here. Callback says, quote, cartoons are just for kids was exactly the argument by which I was dropped off to see heavy metal while the adults went off to do, quote, adult things. And I find that hilarious. Has anybody else seen the movie Heavy Metal?
Yeah, not a kid's film.
Not a kid's film. Not a very good film, in my opinion.
Well, as much as I hate to say it, the whole cartoons are for kids thing, it's kind of He-Man's fault at this point.
Yeah.
I really hate it.
And Looney Tunes.
The last...
No,
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Okay, I guess I will go ahead. I don't blame Looney Tunes for it. You know why I don't? Because even nowadays, you ask like your parents, they liked Looney Tunes and still like it, they would still say yes. In my household,
do, but they would, and in the same breath, they would still say cartoons are for kids.
No, I
after saying that they like Looney Tunes.
I haven't had that experience with any adult that has told me cartoons are for kids. I say, well, what about Looney Tunes? Would you still watch it? Yeah, man, Looney Tunes is great. I'm like, but you don't think it's for kids? No, man, I love Looney Tunes. There's always that dichotomy there with these people because it's what they understand. When I say that it's He-Man's fault that cartoons are for kids, it's because of the deregulation of children's media in the 80s by the Reagan administration. He-Man, while in my opinion a fantastic show, had a lot of heart to it, and I could go into detail. It was still made to put merchandise, therefore put in the slot of children's entertainment. And the 80s to the 90s to the 2000s, boom, that's been the model we've always used since then, and we haven't stopped.
Well, cartoons are for kids really benefited people like me growing up because, like, oh, cartoons for kids. And then you start watching The Simpsons and anime and other shows, and it's like, holy crap, I'm not supposed to watch this. This is awesome. That was really a kid's benefits when I was a kid. That's right, Mom and Dad. Cartoons are for kids. Don't worry about it. It's just animation. Nothing to see here.
My parents kept such a tight leash on me. Number one, not only was Simpsons not allowed, my mom had to catch the wrong episode of the 90s X-Men. She couldn't have caught the one with Nightcrawler and Wolverine and talking about God. No, she had to catch the one with Apocalypse and his four horsemen and say, nah, we're not doing this.
Yeah. Oh, that did suck when that happened.
I remember the day I was watching Dragon Ball Z, and I forget which dub it was, but when Goku is fighting Frieza, he goes off on a tangent and actually quotes the Bible, says something like, "I am the Alpha and the Omega." I forget which dub this is. My mother flipped.
Push it dub.
Yeah,
oh my god, that happened to me, and I think it was the same part of the arc too. Like my grandma walked in and was like, "That's blasphemy. They're not Jesus. What are you watching? Does your mother know you're watching this?" And I'm like, "Oh, damn it." I love you, Grandma. Rest in peace.
No, imagine. No, I don't know what your grandmother was like, but you've met my mother, so just imagine that freak out multiplied by Italian.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah. My grandma was like the sweetest person on the planet. So when you freaked out, you stood at attention because you were like, "Oh shit, Grandma's mad."
Yeah.
That's bad.
We
Grandma's never
all had
mad.
some of the most free but most restrictive TV watchings compared to mine.
Yes,
I was allowed to watch Batman, Dragon Ball, all the action stuff, Thundercats, and all that. The shows I wasn't allowed to watch was Cow and Chicken and Ed, Edd and Eddy.
Weird.
And anything on Fox.
Cow and Chicken.
Why Ed and Eddy and Cow and Chicken? Did they do the same thing? They walk in on the wrong scene?
To quote them, when you watch trash, you regurgitate trash.
Oh, they were doing quality gatekeeping. Yeah, thanks, Mom and Dad.
Also, I don't know a lot of the shows Leo's been bringing up for the most part because I didn't. A lot of the stuff I watched on Cartoon Network was not the 80s stuff, it was the 60s and 70s stuff, so a lot of this stuff is going over my head.
Sounds like Boomerang era
Yes.
stuff. Okay.
Well,
My parents grew up on Hanna-Barbera, so that is what was on our house.
Well, there you go.
that is also now owned by Warner Brothers, and they don't know how to treat that either.
Oh, I didn't know that. I was going to say
It was still a good movie.
There's only one solution.
What is it?
There's only one solution. I'm going to have to buy Warner Brothers.
There you go. No, Disney will just buy Warner Brothers. They'll just have
You can
everything.
barely afford bread.
I mean, I was going to recommend a Crusade, but sure, why not?
Do you know why? Do you know why Hanna-Barbera got bought by Warner Brothers?
Tell me.
Because Hanna-Barbera was the worst of the big three. Every one of their cartoons were either bad or overrated. Scooby-Doo was the best thing that Hanna-Barbera ever produced, and it was only okay.
I don't know. I kind of disagree with that because I really enjoyed the Flintstones.
A lot of people. The Flintstones are iconic and cool to look at with some memories, but the cartoon was not good. The content wasn't good. Like Hanna-Barbera was really lacking in content compared to Disney and Warner Brothers. Had way more interesting stuff going on, and I'll die on that hill. Hanna-Barbera is so overrated; they didn't deserve to be a big three. Ba-boom!
Flintstones, Jetsons, Grape Ape.
Unironically love Top Cap.
El Kabong!
Oh gosh.
All right,
Yeah,
so last one I got here from Kelbeck says, you get people who see who have like quotes She-Ra through the lens of feminism, or through the lens of LGBT, or through the lens of Catholic theology, and it's all equally idiotic. What do we think about that?
I disagree.
Tell me.
I disagree for two reasons. Number one, even the original She-Ra was very feministic, and Filmation was, to quote Lou Scheimer's daughter, the gayest place in like animation. As far as seeing things through the lenses, I mean, that's all about death of the author. You can extrapolate anything out of anything. It's not idiotic. It all depends on the reason why you're doing it, how you do it, and how well you pull it off. You can take apart Lord of the Rings, you can take apart Chronicles of Narnia, the Screw Tape Letters, all these different things. You can extrapolate and interpret through different lenses. It all depends on how you do it, why you do it, and the skill level in which you are able to pull it off. I don't think any of these things are inherently stupid, just like I don't think any fictional idea is inherently bad. It's about execution.
And
To give some context,
Go ahead, Cordero.
right, to give some context to Callback's comment, because there was a lot around that. I saw when they were talking about that.
Mm-hmm.
I think what they were saying is it's not bad to look at cartoons through a specific lens, because you're going to do that anyway. Your own life experiences is going to determine the lens or lenses that you experience it through. I think what they were talking about is people will experience it through a specific lens and then make that out to be the only lens it can be experienced to. And that's the only perspective you can look at it from, and it's good or bad based on that. And if it's bad, it's terrible and shouldn't be made. I think that's what Callback was getting at, and that's really annoying. People are like, well, I look at this through the feminist lens, and it's really misogynist when I look at it that way. Therefore, this is bad and shouldn't exist, and that happens all the time. It's annoying.
The way I see it, there's two ways to approach the method of death of the author. You can either do what you just did and apply your connotations to it, or you can say that you can take whatever it is and say, like for me, for example, as a Christian, this is parts of it that agree and disagree with my theology. Or you can say this was what the author was trying to say, and this is how it resonates with me as a Christian, which I believe those are two very different methods. Does anybody agree or disagree?
Disagree.
Tell me why.
I don't disagree.
Oh, okay. I thought you said I disagree. I'm sorry.
I also heard I disagree. I also heard that. I was like, all right, let's go.
I will disagree once. There's two ways to look at things. There's the wrong way and there's the right way, which is my way. Clearly, that's the objective measurement here.
Well, that's not
quoting Brony.
DJ, how dare you take the words out of my mouth?
I know you too well.
I was just about to say that. Well, you see, that can't be Lio because that's my method, and if we disagree on something, then I'm obviously more right.
You're right.
Sure, but that's all I had for the chat. Did anybody else see anything that they wanted to talk about from the chat before we wrap this up?
Callback wants to know, and I would like to thank Callback for backpacking the chat tonight. No, the chat's been great. They've basically been having their own debate in the chat, and it's been really interesting to read. It's like getting to go to two debates at once.
I've been keeping up with that as best I can, but I'm not as good at reading and listening at the same time as you are.
Well, yeah, and it's also been hard to pull comments because everybody's writing a book on all their comments, and it's oh gosh, it's visually intimidating.
Yeah, but chat, this is what I love to see. Keep it up. But
exactly.
Cordero, go for it.
We'll get better at it. But yeah, Callback says he wants to know specifically what we think about the Catholic theology lens. I've seen similar to that, and it was crap. The Catholic lens ruining thing, I guess, or people using the Catholic lens to, carrying stuff out of existence.
Well, yeah, that's exactly it. The Catholics' problem is that they're too prudish. They're too prudish, and I'm saying this as someone who's raised Catholic myself, as most of us in here were, I believe. We're very sensitive to these things, and we sometimes believe that they can have sociological implications that are not healthy for society at large, and therefore would rather it not be there. I'm not the type of Christian that wants anything to be censored. If anything, it should be out there so we can discuss what's good and bad about it. And that can apply to almost any concept. There's, very few things being a Christian, there are definitely things that I don't enjoy because they go against my Christian sensibilities.
I feel like at least in America, the fundamentalist Protestant lens is a lot more restrictive than the Catholic lens.
I would like to make a point of order here. I actually was not raised Catholic. Technically, my theology would fall under Apostolic Pentecostal.
Okay, that's probably closer to the fundamentalist Protestant lens.
I protest against the Protestantism, a rebel.
Oh, so Pentecostals don't consider themselves Protestant, even though
making a joke. Making a joke.
Okay. I protest my Protestant identity. I just got it.
You guys are
caught up to the joke now.
You guys are making my head spin. Last question for tonight. Unless DJ, did you see something from the chat that you wanted to talk about?
I've been too focused trying to understand Leo.
All right. Gotta keep up there, DJ. Pal, last one for the night.
You must be 35 to understand Leo's comments. It's a requirement.
I guess I'll die then.
You are learning well, my young apprentice. Anyway, last one for the night. Paladin Pony T says, which cartoons would you guys say have not aged well and should not be shown to kids? And besides Hanna-Barbera.
That seems like two different things to me. Not aged well. Oh boy, there's a ton. Shouldn't be showed to kids. Almost zero. If it's a cartoon meant for kids, hey, remember my opinion? Probably fine. But stuff that didn't age well, you could come up with a lot of stuff that didn't age well, but it's more funny than like bad.
If anything, it's good to be inclusive like that because it becomes easier to teach history.
Yeah. Just call it a period piece. Bam, now it's not age, it's a period piece.
Okay, I can answer that from my values. Cartoon that did not age well. Probably going to get a little bit of hate for this. The original Ninja Turtles.
How dare you?
I love 80s cartoons, but no, it for me it'd be the original Ninja Turtles. Like,
wasn't that a 90s cartoon though?
It started in 1987.
Okay.
Yeah. And when it ran for 9 years. But cartoon that I would not let kids watch, the original Ren and Stimpy.
Yep.
That's that one does toe the line there. But yeah, for the original Ninja Turtles, my reaction is how dare you, but I did make the mistake of going back and watching some OG Ninja Turtles as an adult, and I was like, oh no, my childhood memory of the show does not hold up. This is
When I did it, I called my mom afterwards. I'm like, I am so sorry you had to sit through this nonsense when I was a kid.
A body! I need a body!
Shredder!
I think we all watched the cartoon and then watched at least the first 2 movies, and we're like, those are awesome, and then our memory decided that the movies were also how the show was. And no, it was not.
I've never seen any of it until 2003.
Well, you see, here's the thing. The original, like, Jim Henson 1990 movie is still one of my favorite movies of all time.
2 is good too. Fight me.
Yeah. Well.
Not as good.
Go ninja, go ninja, go. Go ninja, go ninja, go.
Oh, jeez. Out of my chat. All right. So I think that's a good spot to wrap it up. Does anybody have any a couple of sentences for closing thoughts that they want to give us before we read off the Patreon slide?
Go ninja.
All right. Thank you, Cordero. DJ, you got any closing thoughts for us?
Michael Bay had the better Turtles movie?
Yikes. Wow.
Ooh,
all right, everyone else so we can fight.
Everyone,
get over here.
Everyone's just looking to make me mad tonight. And okay, they're just trying to get under my skin. Brony, they are just trying to get it, and it's working.
Yeah. I'm with you on this one.
DJ, you're supposed to take your anger out on Cordero. He's the one that was trash talking Hanna-Barbera.
I know a lot of Hanna-Barbera is trash. I can accept that, but I had to.
I felt that in my chest, DJ. For God's sakes, I've been hit with knives that didn't cut that deep.
Now you know how I felt being the shield against Leo.
all we need is a wish-granting alien in the Stone Age. That's a good idea.
Yeah. All right.
Like, Happy Days didn't invent jumping the shark. Hanna-Barbera did. Scrappy-Doo, Green Aliens, they invented jumping the shark.
The Scrappy-Doo hate's overrated.
My thought is I want to take DJ and string him up upside down and hit him until candy comes out because of what he said.
That's violent and not for kids.
You guys are going to get me demonetized. Don't wait. Lio, save me from this nonsense. Give me something sane here for a closing thought.
Okay, the same thing for a closing thought is everybody has their own values. Everybody has their own opinions. It's all subjective. Try to get outside of your worldview. Try to get outside of your comfort zone and try to experience different and new things every day.
And I would definitely say that I learned some stuff tonight. So, Lio, thanks for coming on last minute and beating the crap out of me. I'd say it was a good stream. We ran pretty long here. Did anybody else learn anything tonight?
Hong Kong Phooey.
Scatman.
Number 1 super guy.
All right, this is just getting off the rails here. So thanks everybody for tuning in. Thank you DJ and Cordero for joining me tonight. I hope you all learned something, had fun talking. I hope everybody out there watching enjoyed the stream. Thank you for your good conversations in the chat. Thank you for your questions and comments. If you would like to get on this show, I would love to have you. We just need to get you on the Patreon for as little as $1 a month. You get into the server where you can hang out with me, and unfortunately DJ Cordero's there sometimes too. You can make topic suggestions for what you want to hear us talk about on this show. You can get on the show if you want. You can also suggest things for the gaming streams that we do. I'm especially grateful to all of my generous supporters on the $10 and up tier, such as this big long list: Princess Heather Blossom, Shady Oak Ministry, Sid McConroy, Autoknight, Emerald Spencer, Sodden, Girder, Senko, Jennan, Kellogg, Kyle Christensen, this jerk over here with the wings, Stephen A. Wilson, Rein-Kun, Princess Sunshine Sparkle, Bootleg Bard, and the Equestrian City Heroverse series. Be sure to check out all of their links in the description, and I hope to see you next time. We're not going to be streaming this Friday. Have a Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas.
Later, nerds.
Good night, everybody.
Oh, my hate.
Okay, so the last thing that stream is going to hear